Morning, everybody. My name's Aaron. I'm one of the pastors here at Grace. If I haven't met you guys before, I would love to do that here at some point. Thank you guys for being here this morning. If you guys are brand new or you've been here for kind of a couple weeks now, maybe it's your first couple times, I want to make sure you know we have a little gift for you out there. We'd love to know your name, know how you got connected to Grace, and just send you off with a little something as well. But we've got a lot of info about anything you might want to know right at the desk outside the doors, and would love just to hear about how you got connected and meet you. So check that out if you haven't, if you're new or first couple of weeks here. Guys, I also want to let you know about a couple other things coming up here. We just got done with a little bit of a busy season here that was really fun. We get to do our fall bash and kind of invite the community in to do something here. And then the next week we got to go out and do our Go and Do weekend, where we kind of just go around our community. And many of you were involved in different projects we were doing for people. Those couple of weeks were just a real blast. I felt a little bit tired afterwards. Maybe you did too. But that was super fun. I want to let you know about another similar opportunity kind of along those lines. Last couple of years, we've partnered with Higher Middle School. So right over this way, we've partnered with them and another local church to make sure that every single student gets a Christmas gift. So we've done, I think it was like 800 one year. I think it's a little bit less this year, but we would love to invite you to be a part of that. So the way that you can do that is if you go out these middle doors here on your way out, there's a table with some bags and a little paper on it. So if you take that paper, it'll tell you everything that needs to go in a bag. You can take one bag, you can take 6 bags, you can take however many you want, but those all have on there, it's about $10 to $15 a box, I think. Maybe that's not totally right. But it will say on there. So if I'm wrong, I'm sorry, and I cannot help you make up the difference if I was very wrong. So just check that out. See if you'd love to partner with us in that way. We'd love to have you help do that. Super fun to distribute those. Make sure you check that out kind of on your way out. And those are going to be due back on December 5th. So if you take them, don't be like me and forget about them and leave them at home, all right? Fill those up, bring them back by December 5th. We'll give you a couple weeks to forget about it and remember again, okay? So I would love to have you do that. This is a super awesome way for us to partner with a local school and kind of bless our community in that way. It's something the school has like approached us to do with this other church the past couple years. So we're really excited about that. The other church actually invited us into that, and we've been helping them with it the last couple of years. So next thing I want to let you know about is communion. So we have a communion service coming up here on November 18th. If you guys have been to communion with us before, we'd love to invite you back to do that with your family. If you guys haven't, you're newer to Grace, let me just tell you a little bit about it. So when we do communion, this is a believer service. So if you're a follower of Jesus, we'd love to invite you to participate in our communion service on that Thursday night. And we go through the different elements together. It's a really great time. We get to worship. We get to do some remembering what Christ has done in our lives through communion. And if you're not a believer, you are also welcome to come. Even if you're exploring Jesus, not a follower of Jesus, we just ask that you kind of observe that service. But would love to invite you and your family out that if you haven't done that with us before, it's a really neat experience, very meaningful experience, especially leading up to Thanksgiving season here. So would love to have you guys with us during that. That's all I have for you on that. We started a new series last week called Opportunity Cost. This is an investing term, if you're familiar with it, or if you were like me, you were like, where's the S on opportunity costs, right? And that was me. Okay, everybody knew that except for me, confirmed. This is an investing term. When you think about this, right, basically the idea of this is that you are taking a certain course of action, and that causes you to miss out on some other things, right? So whatever course of action you take, you're missing out on some other thing, right? It's the opportunity cost. And what we've been looking to do in this series we started last week is if we could take this same idea and apply it to people and our relationships with them. So the focus during this series is this, right? Looking at the opportunities available to us all the time that we don't have to miss out on, right? Things that we would actually want to focus on. So Ryan kicked us off last week. It was really great. If you missed last week or any of our other weeks, make sure and check out our YouTube channel. You can catch up on there, kind of get the beginning of the series. This one especially is important. We've kind of framed this around this idea of praying for our 3. So we landed on this last week. We got these bracelets here. They're our annoying way of reminding us to pray for 3 people in our lives. And so what we did was we asked to say, man, if we could land this week and say, God, will you show me why I am where I am in life right now, right? And I don't know what that looks like for you. You might be really happy about where you are. You might be very sad about where you are. You might be anywhere in between. You might be angry, whatever it is, right? If we could ask God to say, God, where I am right now, can you show me some opportunities that are around me, right? With people around me. And we said to take that even further, to ask God, is there 3 people in the place that you have me in that maybe don't know Jesus, that I'm not sure if they know Jesus, but I would love for them to know about the hope of Jesus, right? These would be the people that I would want to share my faith with. And so we did that. We took these bracelets and we said, write the name of the 3 people that you choose, or maybe God has laid on your heart, and kind of wear this to remind you to pray for them every day. And we're asking God to help us find these people and opportunities with them. So that's kind of where we landed. If you missed that or you didn't get a bracelet, we still have some. Would love you to participate with us. It's a really fun thing that we're doing. So coming into this week, you might be in a couple different places, right? You might be in a place where you're like, man, I was here last week, and I'm ready to go. I prayed. I asked God to give me 3 people that I could pray for. I'm in on starting to share my faith with people. And this may have really kind of given you a spark for sharing your faith, or what we would call like evangelism, right? You're like, man, I'm really excited to share Jesus with people. You may be also in a place when you hear me talking about sharing the good news of Jesus or the gospel, that might be slightly abrasive based on your history, either with people doing that or growing up in the church, whatever it is, right? You may have had a bad experience there. And so I realize that. You may have grown up in a church where they made you feel bad about it. They yelled at you, whatever, right? You may have had people yell at you from the street corner. You may see the signs at the football game, like whatever it is, right? You may have varying opportunities. But here's what I'd ask of everyone, right? I think this week we can actually be in a spot where together we can learn how to make the most of every opportunity that God would give us. So if you are a person that's saying, I'm committed to this, I have my 3, or I'm going to get my 3, I'm ready to go, I would say, man, look at the idea of maybe I can learn more ways or better ways to start to share my faith with those people. And if you're not a believer, if you're not a follower of Jesus, you're kind of investigating it, you're like, I don't know, I'm just here, man, like I got drugged here, whatever. I would encourage you to do this. If you were interested in finding out more about Jesus, if you were thinking about that, when we talk today, you might think, man, if I'm in this process of thinking about what I am going to decide about Jesus in my life, this is the type of person I might want to hear from. Does that make sense? So we can kind of do that from those couple places. This is what it could look like. So we're going to continue talking today on how to make the most of every opportunity. So we started in this passage in Colossians chapter 4, if you want to turn there. If you guys don't have a Bible, please take one from under the seat. You can use that. You can take it home with you. If you don't have a Bible, we'd love for you to do that so that you can follow along. We're going to start in Colossians 4 and kind of this verse that we've been doing for the series here. It says this in Colossians 4, chapter 4, verse 2. It says, devote yourselves to prayer, being watchful and thankful. And pray for us too, that God may open the door for our message, so we may proclaim the mystery of Christ, for which I am in chains. Pray that I may proclaim it as clearly as I should. So this is kind of what we focused on last week. This week, we're going to focus on these last couple verses here. It says, be wise in the way you act toward outsiders, making the most of every opportunity. Right? Paul's talking to a group of believers here, followers of Jesus. So outsiders is just referring to people who would not say that they followed Jesus. He's saying, let every conversation be always full of grace, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how to answer everyone. So this is kind of where we've been operating at, where we're going to land on this series. And as we start to talk about this calling, right, it's clear that we are to share our faith, right? And most of us, we want to do that because Jesus has changed our lives. To start our conversation today, I think it's really important that we put this kind of in the right context or in the right box, because I don't know about you or how you grew up in church or hearing about the gospel. A lot of times we tend to think of a salvation or someone knowing Jesus as a moment, right? We think of a moment in time where they decide to follow Jesus. And while that's true, right, there is a moment where every person, if they're going to follow Jesus, they make a decision to do that between them and God. What we're actually going to be talking about today is kind of the 99% of work in between when someone might actually have that decision and when you might decide to start praying for your 3. So there's this middle space. And I'm pretty convinced that this is where we live most of our life. I'm pretty convinced that as we seek to help people know Jesus or to love him, we spend most of our time in this zone, right? So that's what we're going to be talking about, is that work in between. So as we start to think in a missional mindset, we start praying for our three and thinking about that, that is where we're going to be. And don't worry, we're going to talk about the decision that's next week, right? So you got to come back for that part. We're going to talk about what, and in that moment, man, what do we do? How can we make that, how can we be there for that and make it awesome? But today we're going to focus on this in-between space that we're more than likely going to live most of our life in. And here's what this looks like. If I had to give it a practical like phrase of what am I actually doing in this in-between space? Like what am I actually doing here? This is what I would say. We are asking ourselves, how do I meet people where they are and bring them where they need to be? People are going to be in all kinds of different places, right? Even within the three people that maybe you've chosen to pray for that you would like for them to know Jesus, or people in your life that you're like, I think they need the hope of Jesus. Or if you even think about yourself before you were a follower of Jesus, we're all in different places. And while certainly there are people that you might encounter that are like, I'm ready to follow Jesus, like, can you help me, right? That is a real scenario. Most of what we do, most of our relationships are going to be in this middle space. So when we think about it, what we're doing is we're meeting people where they are, and we want to bring them to where they need to be. This was really helpful to me when I was growing up. I was so kind of focused on that moment of salvation, right? Just the church that I grew up in, they asked bad questions to me sometimes. So I remember being in middle school, and they asked me, how many people have you led to Christ? You're a Christian. And I was like, dude, I can barely make it through a day of school without a detention. I thought like accepting Christ myself was like the thing. Like, what? I'm like, am I going to get in trouble if I say none? Are they going to kick me out of youth group? Like, no more prizes for me? Like, what's going to happen here? Like, I was actually perplexed by it. And I probably lied. And so I don't know what I did there, but I remember being perplexed by that question. And that kind of went on further into my middle school and high school years. I remember an event where we went to the county fair, and they were like, the goal was to hand out something. It was like, let's give them a gift, but then surprise them with the gospel. That was like the thing we were doing. And I was like, this is confusing. I hope I don't see anyone that actually knows me from school, like, because they're going to be like, what are you doing? And I didn't know what to do, right? I was following the paper. I'm like, hello, do you have a moment for Jesus? And they're like, no. Would it change your mind if I told you could have this mug? No. Can you just check that you accepted Christ in the box so that I don't get in trouble? Like, that was my mind. I'm like, I don't know what to do. And so this perplexed me. It was heavy on my soul at times. I'm like, I don't know no one. I haven't led anyone to Christ. So this was really helpful to me. I remember being in high school, and I went to a Momentum Youth Conference, which is one that we still do with our high schoolers. And there was a guy there who was talking about this very space. And he brought in this old school, like, gym scoring thing. You know what I'm talking about? The gray plastic thing with the blue and the red flip chart scoring. And I don't know if the metrics are the same today because I was younger then. And he said, it's on average, a person is going to have 7 meaningful interactions with the gospel until they're ready to make any type of decision. 7. And so his whole thing was basically, you don't know where you're walking into that. You could be 1. You could be 6, right? It might be more. It might be 12 now. I have no idea. But the idea there, what I want you to take from that, is that you are walking into a process in someone's life. And this really helped take the pressure off me because it had to be a meaningful interaction, right? Not the signs at the football game that somehow get really good. I mean, I've considered doing that just for the seats because I'm like, how do they get seats like there to hold up that sign every time? 1,000. I'm like, I want to go to a Browns game and sit there. Like, I don't know, the big games, the Super Bowl. But that's probably not a meaningful interaction, right? We're probably not talking about like someone standing on the street corner with a sign, right? We're talking about meaningful interactions. And so when we think about praying for our 3, the reason we would even narrow it down that far is because it's hard to have meaningful interactions with everyone at a county fair. And I'm not even saying anything about the heart of the people who are doing that or even that itself. What I'm saying is that is not what we're trying to do in this space, right? It's not on me. And so we're going to talk a little bit about this. And the reason it's important is because we kind of need to know what the win is, right? We need to know, okay, I want to do the right thing. It's why I went and did those things. I want people to know Jesus. I do want that. I want them to know about the hope I have, the forgiveness I've experienced. I truly want that. So when we think about this space where we've been praying to ask God for opportunities with the people in the place that we are now, maybe our 3 people, what we're actually doing is saying, what I actually am saying is I want to make the most of that opportunity, right? And so here's what becomes the win here. A win is when we act on the opportunities that God puts in front of us with the goal of relationship and credibility. You're walking in, number 3, number 5, you don't know where you're at. But a meaningful relationship, a meaningful interaction is what we're actually shooting for. And the goal is certainly we want them to know Jesus, right? That's the long-term big vision goal. But what I'm actually doing in these opportunities and the in-between is I'm looking for opportunities to have relationship and earn credibility with people. Think about this for a second. This is kind of how the world works, right? Who doesn't like being the new guy? You know why? No one knows your humor. You have no credibility. No one really cares what you have to say most of the time, right? It's relationship and credibility is what we're after. And I'm not even saying this in a way that we need for our hearts to be in the right place. We need to have our minds on the fact that we want them to know Jesus, because another thing that works just as badly as other things is hypocrisy, right? When we say things and we don't actually do them, or we say one thing and we live another, right? Our heart has to be in the right place. But our heart being in the right place, coupled with the wrong action, can sometimes be just as unhelpful, right? And we'll unpack this a little bit. But this is how it works, because sometimes, right, I've done some of these things before. What ends up happening when our heart is maybe in the right place and we're not looking to earn relationship and credibility is we might end up like roasting people with the gospel. Oh, well, you know what it says in Romans? You're like, no, actually. Well, let me tell you, I'll yell it at you, right? Like, you can't preach angrily to someone, right? You're not using, when you're like, hey, you know what you idiots ought to do here at work? Hey, aren't you the guy that goes to church? Yeah, but you suck, right? This is not working, right? Right? That our heart needs to be in the right place, coupled with making the most of opportunities, right? We don't want to create a facade where we're doing things and saying things in order to like hide the fact that we're not perfect, right? I've started just letting people right away, hi, my name's Aaron, I will let you down in the near future, right? Just to get that out of the way, right? Because what we don't want to do, what I saw so much growing up was all these people seemed like they had it figured out, and I'm like, wow, I'm not even like a little bit on the way to there, and so it was unachievable. And what actually ended up happening, these people were not also perfect. There was a facade because of the words that they used and what they did, right? One of the biggest criticisms of Christians, right, whether we've earned it or not, I don't even have a lot of commentary on that. One of the biggest criticisms of the church is that they say one thing and they do another, right? And I think this relates to the fact on how if we make the most of an opportunity or not, right? If we seek to do the right thing in those. So how do we begin to do this, right? We want to get really clear on what we are doing, right? We're earning relationship and credibility in this middle zone. And here's why we start to do this. I love the way that this is put in 1 Corinthians. If you want to turn there with me, 1 Corinthians 3, 5 is where we're going to start. We're going to jump around just a little bit. But here's what it says in 1 Corinthians, right? Paul's talking to he's talking to the church there. And he's talking about himself and one of the other leaders. And he says this, what, after all, is Apollos? And what is Paul? Only servants through whom you came to believe, as the Lord has assigned to each his task. He's saying, I, Paul, is talking here, I planted the seeds, Apollos watered it, but God has been making it grow. So neither the one who plants nor the one who waters is anything, but only God who makes things grow. If you skip down to verse 8 here, this is what it starts to say. In verse 8 it says, the one who plants and the one who waters have one purpose, and they will each be rewarded according to their own labor. For we are co-workers in God's service. You are God's field, God's building. I love this because this gives us a really clear picture of how this process starts to work and where we are. When we look at what we're doing in this middle space, we are planting and watering, okay? When we're talking about what we're doing, We are planting and watering. And here's where this becomes important, because what's really cool about this whole thing from a larger picture is that God could have done this all on his own. If he wanted to evangelize people through a different way, he could have done that. But God actually chose to involve us in very specific ways. Right? It says that we have one job to do, right? He has given us, each man, his task. Man, when I think about my 3, I'm like, that's my task, is to be faithful to these people. And so I start to look at this differently. Now, when you think about what, I'm going to go deep into a garden analogy here, right? I'm not a gardener, so don't ask me any questions. I'm terrible at it. But for the sake of this analogy, right, when I think about watering and planting, these are things that have to be done if you expect things to grow, right? You ever tried not watering tomatoes? I don't even do anything anymore because it seems like they turn out bad either way. But like, if you don't water the plant that you're trying to hope is going to grow, it's probably not going to grow. If you don't plant it to begin with, you can do the math on that one, right? If it never exists in the first place. Those are things that have to be done. Man, when I look at this middle ground and acting on the opportunities that God puts in front of us, this is what we're doing. We are planting and watering. And man, this like did good for my soul, because I spent so much time believing that it was my responsibility to make it grow. That was the way that question was framed to me. Maybe you've been in a situation where you got to go out and do it because, I mean, what if you miss and then that person ends up in hell? And you're like, that is a lot to take in over breakfast, okay? And like on a meeting, and so I'm freaking out. But when I look at what God's word actually says, I'm planting and watering. I'm acting on opportunities that God has given me, but God makes it grow. I'm not frantically dumping fertilizer on there and out there like doing a dance to make it grow. None of those things exist. It's almost a miracle of life, right? It's probably what it would be referred to. It's a God who makes it grow. Could God make it grow without the planting and the watering? Sure could. But he chooses to involve us. So you and I, when we look at making the most of every opportunity, we are planting and watering in almost expectant joy of what God is going to bring from that, because we know that he will make things grow. I really believe that seeing ourselves in that position is what makes a huge difference here, because we are co-laborers with Christ, right? When we think about who we are in this equation, we think about what are we doing? We are co-laboring with Christ. I thought about this when I was working this week on it. I thought about flying, and I thought about pilots, okay? So if you're a pilot, I apologize, or if you know a lot about it, I am not, so this may be just wrong, but it's a helpful picture for me. When I remember walking onto planes, you know, like everybody stands out and they like greet you like you're getting on the plane. I don't know if they're like trying to see, like, does this guy look weird? Hey, put an APB on that guy, he looks pretty weird. Or are they like just happy to be out of the cockpit? I don't know, but they're standing there, and you always see the pilot. You see 2 pilots in my mind. Now, I know that there's a pilot and a co-pilot. They, like, introduce themselves over the thing, all weird. I love doing impressions, but I will spare you of the, like, airplane guy impression. But there's a pilot and a co-pilot. And if I looked at them side by side, unless they had a badge that says pilot and co-pilot, maybe they do. Most of the time, I've never noticed that. I'm like, okay, both of these guys know how to fly the plane. Like, they're both doing the same thing in there. The co-pilot's like, he's flipping the same switches. He's got the same controls. If pilot man has a heart attack, I guess co-pilot guy is flying the plane now, so he's going to land the plane, hopefully. Right? This analogy breaks down at some point. But when I think about that, I'm like, they're doing the same thing. They're co-laboring, but one guy is definitely in charge. Right? God's not going to die and we have to fly the plane. That's not the point. Focus on the other part, right? When we're there together, right? It's almost indistinguishable to me. Yeah, take a second. Just get that out of your mind. I'm sorry. When you think about this, right, when you think about the pilot, I'm like, we're co-laboring. Like, I'm doing the same things. I'm almost indistinguishable in my actions, but there's one person who's definitely in charge. And I think about that a lot, because I'm like, man, God and I, we are working together on this. What starts to happen is a co-pilot or a co-laborer, right? Most people shouldn't see very much difference in action, right? They should look at the actions of Christ and the actions of what we do when making the most of these opportunities as very similar, right? We are obviously sinful people who will mess up. That is a thing that we need people to know, but they should look similar. And not only that, when I'm a co-pilot or a co-laborer, I am a humble servant to God's plan. I am a humble servant to the pilot's plan, right? I am here to like help you with this thing that you are doing. So if I start to view myself this way, not only does it relieve a little bit of pressure for one, it just gives me a really clear lane to run in. I am co-laboring with Christ. I'm doing important work that needs done. It's valuable. It's needed. People see Jesus differently because of what I do. But in the end, it is Jesus, it is God who changes their heart, who makes it grow beyond the point of it just being like, that's a nice thing, right? Jesus does that. I love this. It's super fun. And so when we start to look at this a little further, right, we can actually break this down a little more, right? Okay, we know what seat we're in. We know how we're supposed to look at this. Now, practically, what does this start and look like? I want to go to Titus chapter 3 and start there. And here's what I want to look at here. This is the one where I go to verse 8. I told you the wrong ones in the last one. I apologize. It was 5 through 9 on Corinthians. This is 5, and then we'll jump to 8. So in Titus chapter 3, here's what it says. At one time, we too, he's talking to people who are followers of Jesus. At one time, we too were foolish, disobedient, deceived and enslaved by all kinds of passions and pleasures. We lived in malice and envy, being hated and hating one another. But when the kindness and love of God our Savior appeared, he saved us, not because of righteous things we had done, but because of his mercy. The next couple of verses explain that a little further, but jump down to verse 8, and here's what it starts to say. This is a trustworthy saying. And I want you to stress these things so that those who have trusted in God may be careful to devote themselves to doing what is good. These things are excellent and profitable for everyone. But avoid foolish controversies, genealogies, and arguments and quarrels about the law, because these are unprofitable and useless. So practically looking at this, it starts to even become clearer on what are we supposed, how do we actually do this? And I love this because we're not doing this because if we don't do it, we're not earning our righteousness. When we start to follow Jesus, when we accept his forgiveness, he gives us his righteousness. He covers us. We're not earning things. It's out of our place of humility because we know how much we were forgiven. We've experienced the love and the kindness that we start to commit ourselves to doing good in hopes that others may see that. We start to know where we came from, right? We were once foolish, we were disobedient, we were all these things. So in this space between identifying our three, right, this is different, right? Because we know where we came from, right? Notice what changed us in that verse. If you look at your experience, think about what changed you. It was kindness. It was love. And it was mercy, right? Not getting what we do deserve. And if I start to think about opportunities with people, if you talk to anyone, and what it doesn't say in this verse, no one's like, yeah, I was just driving down the street and the guy yelled in my window, repent or perish. And I was like, there it is. No, right? That's not anyone's story. They were probably frightened, maybe. They're like, well, I'm not going to church if they're going to yell at me when it surprised me when I walk in. It's like a haunted house situation. What's happening? Right? They didn't say that, man, I was really having a tough time. And then my neighbor came over and told me, well, that's a sin, right? And you're like, that's not anyone's story. Right? If you think about your story, well, I was being a jerk and then they gave me what I really deserved. So, I decided to follow Jesus. That's probably not your story. It's not my story. And it is not what the Bible defines us for. What the Bible says is with kindness, with love, and with mercy. Right? So being devoted to good works becomes how I actually start to live out the gospel. And this is what it looks like practically, right? It's the reason why we might do a go and do weekend like we did a couple weeks ago, right? We're not even interviewing people and making sure that they're well, do you know that the Bible says this and this? No, we're not doing that. We find someone and we exercise love, kindness, and mercy with no strings attached. And by the way, most of those are not things that we've just gone out and got. Most of those are connections to someone's three. I imagine most of the people that we serve in some ways come from community connections, people that who need to experience kindness and love, and you want to do that for them, and this is a way, right? That's what we're doing. And when I think about being at school, and I think about being in classrooms, there's always those couple of people in our major that's somehow ended up in every one of our classes, and I just can't stand the guy, and I get put in a group with them all the time, like whatever that is, right? There's focus of like, my goal is to get away from this person, is usually what you're thinking to yourself. Man, if this person doesn't know Jesus, or I just can't stand them, right? Because my actual goal is maybe for them to know Jesus. When God puts opportunities in front of me, I'm going to say, well, maybe the project won't get done as well. Maybe, like, I don't know what it is for you, right? If you're at work and you're like, I really want this position. I know how it needs to go. Like, I know what you need to do. And you can't stand the guy that's in charge in any situation, or you can't stand the teacher of this class because they don't know what they're doing, right? Sure, they deserve something, right? But man, it's an opportunity, especially if we want this person to know Jesus. If they're one of our three, or they're just people around us, it's an opportunity to exercise what? Kindness, love, and mercy. And I'm not saying there's never a time to push, never a time to insert yourself, right? I'm asking you to think differently about the people who you might want to know Jesus. The reality is I'm not at your job, but those scenarios we start to maybe think differently about, right? Because if I realize the depth of my forgiveness, I was foolish. I was doing stuff on my own. I thought I was great. I was distracted by these things in pursuit of this. The more I understand about the depth of my forgiveness, the easier it becomes to exercise that towards others, because I just know that, man, in the depths of my heart, I was in a worse spot, or I did way worse, or I deserved way worse, right? Whatever it is for you. And so it starts to change our reaction. It's why we would devote ourselves, right? Because if I want to be a pilot, if I want to be a co-pilot, I want to water and plant these opportunities that God is giving me in this in-between space, man, I'm going to start to do things that maybe don't make sense to others. Dude, if you know how to fix it, why don't you just go tell that guy that he's stupid? And you're like, well, I'm a servant to God's plan. I don't know what he's doing. So I want to make the most of this opportunity. Well, why don't you just tell off your family member, right? They say they go to church too. Why don't you just tell them what it says in Romans? I don't know why I keep picking on Romans, right? That's not a thing. But you're like, you could easily go tell someone off. But you're like, ooh, I'm a servant to God's plan for this person. I'm committed to doing good to make that almost easier for them. I'm planting and watering here. So I'm going to be careful what I say and do. That's why we might think of it that way, right? I might never even see a return on these things. I might be flip number 3, and I move, but I don't know who that next person is. Remember, I'm a servant to God's plan, however many flips that is, right? Wherever I show up. I'm earning relationship and credibility. It's how the world works, right? We are earning the right to speak truth. We're earning the right to speak love, right? And here's something that's really interesting, I find, as we move further into this, right? As we earn relationship and credibility, what we start to do is our goal is to share the good news of Jesus with them. The hope that we found, the forgiveness that we found, the joy that we found. That's our goal, right? We would probably sum that up and say, I want to share the gospel with them. But here's what I would say. Most of the time, before we speak the gospel, we need to be the gospel to someone, right? It's committing ourselves, right? Before I'm going to be love and truth, even if I'm going to speak the truth in love, but before I do that, I better earn the credibility for them to know that I'm loving. Before I start, if I want to talk to them about mercy and grace, man, I want to I want to pray for opportunities to be merciful and graceful to them, to earn the relationship and the credibility to say that I am a merciful and graceful person because of what God has done for me. Now I realize each person is going to have a different starting point, right? Someone might be really ready to hear the gospel. You may not even have a relationship where you talk to them right now. And so you're just praying for any opportunity. God, as we sit silently across from each other at Thanksgiving, can you work in their heart? Like, just give me extra strength to not, go off, because I want to make the most of this opportunity, right? I don't know what it is for you, but to think differently about that. And I'll be honest, I've done this in different ways, right? Because of the past history of what I've had, I knew I wanted to share my faith. I didn't know how to do it. I only knew what I was taught. I remember I had a friend one time, and I was praying for opportunities. I wanted him to know Jesus. My heart was in the right place. But the only thing I knew how to do in a moment where I finally, like, God set this awesome moment up where I was just like with him hanging out. And I was like, well, since I have to lead him to Christ, because that's what I've been taught, I guess I gotta like tell him the whole story of the Bible. And so I panicked and I kind of went, I was like, oh, there's this Noah's Ark thing, and then there's like sin, and there's, I was like, I mean, it had to seem like what is this guy doing? Like what in the world is happening to me? It doesn't matter that what I said was true and maybe would have been helpful. What happened in that moment was it was ill-timed, right? It was ill-timed. I had no relationship with him. So all I was to him at that moment was, this was one of my wife's coworkers' husbands. All I was to him at that moment was my wife's coworker's husband who tried to tell me the entire mega story of the Bible. And that's the relationship that we had, right? It was ill-timed. My heart was in the right place. Luckily for me, God is the one who makes things grow, right? I didn't have to worry about that. And luckily, he didn't talk to me for a while, which I don't even blame him, to be honest. That was pretty weird. But looking back, right, we have a relationship now, and we were able to mend that. But man, looking back on that, I'm like, man, you know what? I think I would have done that differently. As I'm praying for opportunities and I desire that, I think maybe I would have done something a little different, right? I think I might have had to be like quick to action and not to words, right? Maybe I should have like asked him about it. Maybe I should have been quick to ask questions. I don't know. But here's the thing is what happened is, man, in that moment, I think I needed to value his words instead of say mine, right? I just need to like ask him about his life. I could have even asked him what he thought about God, maybe. I mean, I think that's an okay sometimes place to start. I could have almost done anything else that would have given him the opportunity, because I'm earning relationship and credibility, right? So it causes me to act differently, right? I wasn't trying to like make him think I was really cool. That's impossible. I wasn't trying to make him think that I was really good at being a Christian, right? To make up for something, right? I probably should have just tried to be his friend at that point in this middle space. Man, in another time in my life, we started doing this Pray for Your Three a while ago at one of our other campuses before this one existed. And so I got the opportunity to do this for a while. And I had the opportunity to see one of the three that I had been praying for accept Christ. And that's awesome. But here's the point of that. When I look back on that relationship, that was the one that I felt like, man, I'm just kind of in it. I'm there because like God put me here. It's where I live. That's why I'm here. I almost feel like I didn't do enough in that one. I just kind of like helped him with some stuff and like talked to him during COVID. I was a good friend. I listened well. I was loving, right? I just literally almost did nothing. It was insane to me that I just planted and watered. I needed help carrying something, so those are the types of things, right? I was quick to action. And not even on purpose. I'm not even claiming that I was like, I figured it out. It was kind of an accident. But what I've realized is that, man, if I can start differently, this is going to make a lot of sense. And here's what starts to happen, right? What actually people need that I found that is so helpful to me is before I start to engage in anything else, I need to show people how God changed my life before I tell them how God could change theirs. Right? I need to show people how God has changed my life before I tell them how God can change theirs. Right? It should make sense when I eventually get there, because if I commit myself in this middle space to following Christ for 3 months, 3 years, whatever, and acting on these opportunities, when it's finally time to speak, whether it's me doing it, it's someone else in their life at the time, when it's finally time to speak, if we commit to this, they will listen, because we've earned the respect, the credibility. We've earned the relationship. We've shown them how God has changed. And people will do the backwards math. It's crazy to me, the one of my three that I saw, they're like, oh, that's why I'm like, yep. I almost didn't do anything. As we live our life and pray for opportunities, we need to be quick to action, because when it's finally time to speak, we're going to talk about this next week, they will listen. And that's kind of what I landed on, man, as I think about co-laboring with Christ. I'm like, God, I'm a servant to your plan for this person. Can you just involve me? I want to be there for it. I want to help. And I start to dig into this a little more, and I show them how God has changed my life before I ever say a word about how he might change theirs. And this process will speed up, it'll slow down, it'll happen at different paces. But being committed to this co-labor mindset is so important. So here's how I want to end this week as we think about this middle space. As you think about this, I have some questions or maybe some things that you can talk to God about and ask in relation to your three, or really anyone that you would hope would eventually know Jesus. Here's what you can ask is, first ask God to say, God, can you help me be a servant to your plan? Help me be a co-laborer. A lot of us are very self-motivated people, and we would like to encourage things to grow. We would like to grow them. And I admire the enthusiasm, and it's the right spirit, right? It's that urgency. But we need to just plant and water, right? God, help me to be a servant to your plan. If I'm going to do something, maybe just be like, okay, God, can I be a servant to your plan differently somehow? Here's a second thing, is ask God to help you be devoted to utilizing action towards others out of humility and desire to see them grow. If I'm thinking about what I can do, God, help me to be quick to utilize action, right? Quicker to action than maybe I am to words, right? As I look for opportunities and think about the opportunities you have given me, right? As I look to create relationship and credibility, help me be quick to action and not to words. The last thing I would say is if you don't know Jesus, if you're not a follower of Jesus and you're thinking about this, here's what I would ask you to do is if you're interested in exploring Jesus or really giving a hard look at it, is to think about in your life someone who maybe says that they go to church or follow Jesus that you know about, or a person close to you. Look for a person who would be like what we talked about today. Right? If you're interested in following Jesus or even just hearing more about it, this is the way that you would probably want to hear about it, right? It's the way I want to hear about anything, even if I'm just like working on my car wrong, right? It's just helpful when people engage me in a helpful way, right? I do that a lot. But guys, as we do this together, I think this makes a huge difference as we look at how we share the gospel with others. As you think about the specific place that you're in today, I'm sure you have people on your mind, maybe situations on your mind. I want you to feel almost a freedom from the times maybe you've done this badly. I've been there and it feels awful to know that God is the one who makes it grow. You can't ruin it you can't ruin it on accident, right? God is going to take care of it. And those of you that maybe you're like, I didn't even know I was supposed to be doing this sort of thing. Maybe ask God to help you build a plan for what does this look like in my family, to start evangelizing people that we know, to start living out and being quick to action in others' lives. Let me pray for us. The band's going to give us a little time to think about this. And guys, as you think about this, maybe pray for specific opportunities with your three people and think about them in this frame of mind. Jesus, we're so thankful for you. We're thankful that, God, you see us as co-laborers. God, we're thankful that, first of all, that you did this for us, that we're able to experience the same forgiveness that we're talking about showing others. God, in even a more perfect way. We're thankful that you sent your son to live a life for us, to forgive us of our sins, to die on the cross so that we could have a relationship with you. And God, it's out of that humility that we want others to know about the hope and joy that we have found. God, I think in most of our hearts, if we're seeking to do this, we have the right hearts. Sometimes we just don't know what to do, or we can overcomplicate it, whatever it is, God. And different relationships make this super complicated. So help clear our minds. God, help us to see ourselves as co-laborers with you, thankful that you've chosen to involve us in the lives of people that we dearly love. God, help us to be quick to action rather to words. And God, as we earn credibility in relationship, God, help us just build a foundation for the people that we love, maybe our three or people we want to know Jesus, that whenever the time comes, when they're ready to make a decision, that it would be almost easy because of maybe the path we've paved for someone else. God, we love you and we are committed to you in that way. Help all of those who have committed to their three or to others in their lives as they walk through each of those relationships and all of the hard parts about it. We love you, Jesus. We're thankful for your example.